City TV Vancouver is a proud supporter of Pride. Happening tonight in Vancouver.
We need to find out who did this to Trina.
Just ahead, a sizable reward is available for anyone with information that can help the homicide investigation of Trina Hunt.
We need you to come forward. We need you to be Trina's voice.
It's painful to so many people to see this really trending in the wrong way.
About 6 people died of an overdose per day across BC last month, a 43% increase over the number of deaths reported in April of last year. Just ahead, the challenges of accessing services and supports when many need it the most.
You know what discrimination is? Discrimination is when the government doesn't think you're worth the money.
The legacy of Canada's residential school system persists as activists call on the federal government to properly fund Indigenous education.
This is City News Everywhere.
Good evening. We begin with today's case count for COVID-19 in BC. It is the lowest daily total since October 20th. Just 184 new cases and no new deaths have been reported in the last day. That hasn't happened since May 5th. 254 people are currently in hospital, 80 in intensive care. More than 3.3 million doses of vaccine have been administered so far. Just over 70% of all eligible adults in BC and 67% of people 12 and older have received their first shot.
Mixing and matching COVID shots. Canada's advisory panel says it's okay.
You can receive one vaccine product for your first dose and safely receive a different vaccine for your second dose.
But should you? The mixed messages with new advice.
We need to find out who did this to Trina.
We know someone out there knows something or has heard something.
The family of Trina Hunt is pleading with the public for more information months after the Port Moody woman's remains were found in Hope on March 29th.
Do you know something? Anything? The family of Trina Hunt is offering a reward of up to $50,000 for new information leading to an arrest and laying of criminal charges.
Whatever it takes for them to come forwards, we are more than happy to part with that money because we just need to know answers.
Trina's sister-in-law, Jen Ibbett, says a reward was always an idea but never necessary, and police only recently told them it could be beneficial at this point in the investigation. Ibbett hopes the reward will help Trina's story reach wider communities.
Maybe some people don't know about Trina, right? So we're hoping what this reward does is it branches out into different communities. Not the necessarily Port Moody community, but all the communities in the Lower Mainland and in the Valley, and hopefully somewhere someone knows something.
Trina was last seen in January at her Heritage Woods home, prompting a high-profile search that ended May 1st, when investigators confirmed her remains were found in Hope on March 29th. That's when her missing persons case started being treated as a homicide. IHIT did not provide any new information on Tuesday, insisting on maintaining the integrity of the case.
I'm not going to talk about suspects or persons of interest at this time, but I can tell you that the investigation is progressing well, and that's kind of where I have to leave it at that.
Throughout this saga, Jen Ibbett says Trina would have been proud of her family.
We have gained such a strong bond through this that it's just, you know, it really is all thanks to Trina, but it's so thanks to Trina in such a weird way. Like, we're so connected, and she would be so proud of how connected we are now. But it's just sad that this is how this has really come forward.
The family also has a message for the person who took Trina away from them.
Own up to your actions and accept the consequences. It's the least you can do. We know you're out there, and our family and our community will continue fighting for answers. We will get justice for Trina.
Anyone with new information on Trina Hunt's death is asked to call police. Keir Junos, City News.
You're ripping our Bear Creek Park down. Yeah. That's our Stanley Park. And many families enjoy this park.
After a 5-4 vote at Surrey City Council Monday night, a road will be going through Bear Creek Park. Coming up, what some say they plan to do in a last-ditch effort to stop the work from happening.
Hearing these numbers, it's people's sons and daughters and mums and fathers.
176 British Columbians died from an overdose in April, according to the BC Coroner Service. That's about 6 lives lost per day. April marked the 14th month in a row that saw more than 100 suspected illicit drug toxicity deaths in BC.
Those are young lives lost. That really hits me hard, is that they haven't had a chance to even live life yet.
Last month's overdose numbers in BC are a record for the month of April, representing a 43% increase over the number of deaths reported in April 2020. Stephen Hall with Together We Can Addiction Recovery and Education Society says there's not nearly enough treatment beds and services in the province.
Our government could certainly step up a bit more in terms of abstinence-based recovery. So our detox centers, we don't have enough beds. To start with, we don't have enough beds. The second piece is the window of opportunity for somebody who's actually ready to get clean is very small.
Hall has struggled with his own addictions and says the upward trend of overdose numbers has a lot to do with stigma.
What we're seeing a lot of is just miseducation, is people don't understand the process of getting clean, of doing recovery, but they also don't understand what addiction means and what it actually truly means to be in addiction.
Keir MacDonald with the Phoenix Society says during the COVID-19 pandemic, treatment and recovery services have been even more difficult to access.
Access to any resources has had its challenges, whether that was accessing harm reduction services or treatment and recovery services. Those windows for people to seek help or seek a bed, is often fleeting. And so when people now face those extended barriers and delays, that's a key challenge.
And Leslie McBain with Mom Stop the Harm says asking for help in the first place is a struggle many face.
It takes courage to reach out. And when you think you might be met with some kind of negative response or, a response that isn't helpful, it's very difficult.
680 people died from an illicit drug overdose in BC in the first 4 months of this year. To put that into perspective, the same number of COVID-19 related deaths were reported over the same time frame.
The missing piece is a safe, regulated supply of the drugs that people need.
We've seen what can happen through COVID, where you treat, a public health emergency with a significant amount of urgency and investment. I think what we haven't seen here, unfortunately, is either the same urgency or the same investment.
And a reminder for those not ready, not able, or not interested in accessing treatment services.
Things like the Lifeguard app, really important mechanisms to make sure that there are those safety nets around. That at least is there a friend with you or someone you can sort of alert that you'll be using substances.
In Vancouver, Miranda Fatour, City News.
What it means that all the kids that live in here can't cross this road safely. We all walk in there. We all enjoy everything that is in there. It's just not fair.
The anger is still raw from a number of residents who live near and visit Bear Creek Park in Surrey. Late Monday night, City Council, by a 5-4 vote, approved going ahead with work on the road, with Mayor Doug McCallum and his slate voting in favor. The road is meant to help with traffic congestion in the area. Glory Smith has lived in the area for close to 30 years, and she has questions about some of the data apparently compiled in support of the project.
He had 13,000 signatures, and we've never seen them and never heard about them. We'd like to see them.
That was where our dump was. It was a garbage dump where Surrey people dumped their garbage for many years. And so what this road is going to do is, if you read the report, it's going to the irony is it's going to help the environment there, because they're going to put a bigger lagoon in, and they're going to fix up and take out the garbage dump.
You're going to cut down almost 100 trees for something that no one wanted. Not once did anyone ever solicit anyone in council that I'm aware of about actually putting this road through.
Councillor Jack Hundile is worried road dangers will increase in the coming years. There is a church with a playground nearby, and he says many come to enjoy the green space and the animals.
That you start putting a 4-lane bridge, or you're building a 4-lane bridge, and even though today you're saying it's only 1 lane or a bike lane, eventually you're causing this to be a full access road going through the middle of what is really the jewel of Surrey. This is the playground that's going to get cut right here, and they're going to have to move the entrance, which is now by the church, all the way a little bit closer in the parking lot. But now you have the road really running right beside this playground area.
So this playground belongs to the church, I guess, eh?
Yeah, this is the church's playground for their preschool program that they run here.
It's very clear that the residents of this city don't want this road. This isn't the first time, the second time, third time. This is the fifth time we've said no.
Councillor Brenda Locke believes there's still a chance the project may not go ahead.
There's always other options. Certainly there's legal options, there's the province, there's the federal government, and you know, one of the peoples that they didn't talk to is First Nations.
But from Smith's observations, that hope appears to be fading.
I found trucks full of bushes and trees and all that sort of thing, and the orange markers up. Surprise. Yeah, we didn't know they were starting now.
Ria Renouf, City News.
There's plenty of outrage after this video was posted on social media, seeming to show a couple of street racers hitting 172 kilometers per hour on a Vancouver street. The video was reposted by a police officer last night. It appears to show the driver of a Tesla pushing his vehicle to 172 kilometers an hour in less than 15 seconds, playing cat and mouse with the driver of another vehicle, weaving through traffic and passing people on sidewalks. It's not clear when this happened, but it's believed this was on Fraser Street near East 49th Avenue at dusk. Police say they've traced the Tesla and are working to identify the other vehicle. Replies online are, for the most part full of anger at the extreme speed and dangerous driving, with many demanding the driver's licenses be pulled for good, some even saying they should face jail time. Well, we recognize the dangers of using a cell phone while driving, but according to a new study from BCAA, we don't recognize the risk of other distracting behaviors behind the wheel. The report suggests almost all drivers think they're focused while they're on the road, but nearly a quarter report accidents or near misses because of distractions. That includes fiddling with music or climate controls, eating or drinking, and even interacting with passengers. BCAA points out studies have shown people can't actually multitask, but switch focus rapidly from activity to activity, meaning they aren't doing a good job at any one thing while distracted. The cost of using public transit in Metro Vancouver is about to go up. TransLink is warning commuters that fares are increasing by just over 2% next month. Starting July 1st, a one-zone trip for an adult using a Compass card will go up 5 cents, 10 cents for a two-zone trip, and 15 cents for a three-zone fare. Concession fares and day passes are also going up, as is the monthly pass rate. TransLink says last year's annual fare change was canceled because of the pandemic. A special debate being held in the House of Commons tonight as federal leaders discuss the tragic discovery of the remains of 215 children at a former residential school in Kamloops.
What we know is that the discovery in Kamloops is part of a larger tragedy, and that from coast to coast to coast, many children forced into the residential school system disappeared without a trace. We know that the harm caused by the legacy of these institutions plays out today in the intergenerational trauma so many families must deal with. And we know that Indigenous peoples still face racism, systemic discrimination, and unacceptable injustices.
This isn't a surprise. There are many examples of Indigenous children being killed, dying at residential schools. But the uncovering of this site is something that opened up wounds and requires healing. And Chief Roseanne Casimir reminded me of the importance of the community, the need for the community to heal, and the importance of the federal government to support in that healing.
This weekend, my 9-year-old son, Jack, asked me why the flags were at half-mast in Ottawa. I had the difficult task of explaining to my son the terrible news of the graves of children found at the site of a residential school. Kids aren't supposed to die at school, Dad, he told me. Sometimes the moral clarity of a child reminds us of our responsibilities as parliamentarians. As a parent, it's devastating to think that 215 children were buried by their school and lost for decades. As an MP and as leader of the Conservative Party, this tragic discovery is a stark reminder of our duty to heal the wounds from this horrific part of our history.
Opposition leader Erin O'Toole and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh called for the government to speed up efforts to follow through on recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that deal with missing children.
That the kids in this school will grow up knowing about residential schools.
The artist behind the witness blanket hoping a new hands-on creation with kids is part of a new generation of change for Canada.
The federal government funds these, and what we've known is that many of the schools, a parliamentary budget officer says, are in very poor condition. In fact, we have had some schools that don't even have a reliable source of water. Only 35% of First Nations homes have broadband access in the middle of a pandemic.
She's one of Canada's most prominent voices for First Nations children and youth. Now, Cindy Blackstock says in the aftermath of the discovery of student remains at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, Canada must now deal with both the legacy of residential schools and the present reality of First Nations education.
Many of the schools have black mold problems, they have rodent issues, and they need to be replaced. On top of that, there's inequalities in terms of the education funding itself, funding for libraries, equipment, teacher salaries, those kinds of things.
Blackstock says the Indian Act puts responsibility for funding Indigenous education firmly in federal hands. A 2013 Queen's University paper reported federally funded schools on reserves and in remote communities often received less money than provincially funded schools. In 2016, the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated the funding gap at $336 to $665 million.
Because of the funding gap, because they are funding at lower levels than the rest of the country, the opportunity, or at least the prospect for them to enter into post-secondary education is considerably lowered.
Veldon Coburn says Canada has been here before. In 1996, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples had a funding plan to close the educational gap for First Nations within 20 years. But then Finance Minister Paul Martin instead cut funding for the then Department of Indian and Northern Affairs.
Demographically, we should have seen almost sort of equal footing of probably, well, at least opportunities anyways for Indigenous students by the time that they were 20 at this point. So infants that were born in 96. However, the gap still remains.
You know, a non-Indigenous child once told me, they said, you know what discrimination is? Discrimination is when the government doesn't think you're worth the money. So what would it feel like if you were one of those kids who wasn't worth the money? Or the parent of a child who wasn't worth the money? That's the lived reality of First Nations children today.
In Ottawa, Shaoli Lee, City News.
I have 2 degrees in history, and I did not know about the atrocities of residential schools from our public education system.
What did you learn about the history of residential schools when you were in grade school? Just ahead, the plea from Indigenous peoples and allies when it comes to our education system.
The artist behind the witness blanket documenting the atrocities of residential schools is hopeful this totem, now standing outside of Victoria Elementary School, is a bridge to change.
I think about what it means for all the kids whose handprints are represented up there, what it means when they're older, when they're the leaders who are making the decisions for this country.
This piece, with dozens of current students' hands carved over the past 2 years with the help of those students' hands, was unveiled last week, just as we were learning of 250 residential school victims' remains discovered in Kamloops. The juxtaposition of the two inescapable and both tangible.
In different ways, this project and the witness blanket and those graves do that. They reach people at a different level, like at a visceral level.
Because of this, he's hopeful the 215 lead finally to systemic change now. But if not, optimistic. This is the last generation that hasn't learned about residential schools or has turned away.
Kids in this school will grow up knowing about residential schools. they'll grow up having had some experience with authentic Indigenous culture and having participated in it. Maybe that changes the level of respect and understanding for it.
Author of youth books about reconciliation and mom to grade school teens, Monique Grace Smith sees this change happening.
Because of what they're learning in school, because of the resources that are available, because of what's happening in the media, because of the conversations around the dinner table, so much is changing.
So much left to go. Resources, she says, specific to Indigenous students, still not where they need to be. Nor are there enough, sometimes not any, Indigenous voices at the table when these decisions are made. But confident today's students will change that.
In a few years, they will be the change makers. They'll be the decision makers, and their heart and their mind and spirit will make decisions from different places. Again, that uphold dignity.
That, so far, Canada's history has not done.
If we lowered our flags in this country for every child that we know died in residential school, it'd be over 11 years before they were raised again.
Looking at the future in these kids' hands, Newman hopeful they will embrace the tragedies of truth of residential schools and the systems that allow them as they embrace the journey of lending their hands to this project.
I guess it just kind of hits me in the heart when I think about that process of transformation. How these kids have gone from have taken ownership of this and what that might look like in 10 years.
For City News in Victoria, I'm News 1130's Lisa Yuzda.
As a student of history, I have 2 degrees in history, and I did not know about the atrocities of residential schools from our public education system.
What did you learn about BC's residential schools when you were in grade school? Calls for more education on the subject have been amplified after the devastating discovery of the bodies of 215 children at a former residential school in Kamloops.
We have some really passionate teachers or teachers that do know or have been doing this work already.
BC teachers Rick Joe and Peggy Janicki say the amount of Indigenous curriculum in our province's schools has significantly increased in the last decade. But the issue they're seeing is supporting educators to make sure the work is being done properly.
With the new curriculum coming out, there was no time and no funding attached to indigenizing the curriculum. Like the new curriculum has every grade and every subject you have to teach about Indigenous people or Aboriginal people. But the government didn't provide any time for teachers to take that time, meaningful time, to learn.
Dr. Amy Parent, an assistant professor in UBC's Educational Studies Department, says she's extremely concerned with the lack of accountability in schools to provide the required education on Indigenous peoples.
We're actually not showing how we're being accountable or having strong measures in place, and really how are we making change. And I think the larger conversation is recognizing the interconnected effects of systemic racism that continues.
Terry Mooring with the BC Teachers Federation says hiring more Indigenous teachers has also been a major priority as they continue to educate BC's youth.
And what we hear from families quite often that are non-Indigenous families is that the first time they've heard of it is when their children come home and talk to them about it because they've learned it in school.
For Jackney, she says she can see her colleagues trying to educate their students in a compassionate way. But the issue is that the teachers need more preparation time to do justice to the topic.
It's really about the workload of teachers, giving them the proper prep time, giving them, enough Pro-D time and the space, because this is really heavy work. It's heavy genocidal work, and everybody will need time. They'll need time.
In Vancouver, Ashley Burr, City News.
Advice from Canada's top health officials today were supposed to provide more clarity and comfort, but may have just added to the confusion over COVID vaccines and what to do the second time around. Bottom line, it's okay to mix and match, but they would rather you not.
People who received a first dose of AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine may receive either AstraZeneca of Covishield vaccine or an mRNA So Pfizer, BioNTech, or Moderna vaccine for their second dose.
The guidelines for which shot to get when are changing again after the National Advisory Committee for Immunization okayed switching it up on Tuesday. AstraZeneca can be followed by one of the others. For those who had a Pfizer or Moderna shot first, they are now interchangeable if the same is unavailable or unknown.
This is a pandemic. We will get real-life data, and it is great that we do. But which means that the committee has to update its recommendations on an ongoing basis. But on top of the real-life data, which is very important.
The decision was based on initial research from Spain and the UK, showing that following one type of vaccine with another is still safe and effective. Questions were raised about the AstraZeneca shot after it was first revealed that a very rare blood clot could develop in those that receive it.
I have mixed feelings, I think, because it's new technology, but I have to think that they're doing the right thing as well.
I'd be prepared to accept the second dose of AstraZeneca also. I think it's fine. I think there's risk with any vaccine. I think there's risk with any drug.
If they say it's safe, if the science says it's safe, I'll take whatever's available so I can get back to a normal life.
For the more than 2 million Canadians who have had their first dose of AstraZeneca, some may not be sure about getting different shots at different times.
We're all anxious as heck. We've got our fight or flight reflexes kicked in. We have for a year. Anything that makes the person feel more comfortable, it's nice to know that the science says, hey, find what works for you and do it.
The recommendation to allow the mRNA vaccines to become interchangeable is also based on history. The same premise has also been used for others, including flu shots in the past.
This good immune boosting effect of that second dose that's different, the mRNA following AstraZeneca, are those general immunological and vaccine knowledge that have been built over decades of vaccine programmatic use and the immunology that goes with it.
All that said, the messaging is still far from clear. While it's okay to mix and match, officials aren't saying those looking for their second dose should do it.
So NACI is not recommending just use them interchangeably, but more that you try and use the same vaccine.
Even before these recommendations were made, health officials in Manitoba already went ahead on Monday and announced that those who have received their AstraZeneca shot could go ahead and get their Pfizer or Moderna shots as their second dose. Ontario's health minister today acknowledged the federal advice but hasn't yet set out a policy, while BC officials are set to make an announcement later this week. Mark McAllister, City News.
Playland will be back for a shortened season as part of BC's COVID-19 restart plan. The amusement park will be open on Friday, June 11th, and then every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for the rest of the month, with a plan to expand to more days and nights later in the summer. A number of safety measures will be in place, including limited capacity and buying tickets only in advance. Space has also been made for physical distancing, and plexiglass shields will be up where possible. Face coverings will also be required while waiting in line and on the rides themselves.
What a day today. Hardly a cloud in the sky, sunshine, warm air, and another one a lot like it tomorrow. This massive area of high pressure ridge building up along the coast, forcing that warm air into the southern and central interior of the province. In fact, all the way across the prairies by the end of the week. We will see a little bit of this cloud cover filtering in late in the day tomorrow, but it's going to be equally as warm as it was today. Daytime highs ranging from 22 down by the water to about 28 inland, but that 28 could feel as warm as 31, 32 degrees with a little bit of humidity. We will get more cloud filling in as we get into Thursday. It's not cool. It's still above seasonal, 20 to 24, 25, those warmer readings inland with the cloud cover. Slight chance for showers on Friday, but right now I'm just keeping it mainly cloudy with the rain showing up on Saturday. Cooler temperatures on the weekend as well. Chance for showers Sunday and back into the teens, it looks like, to the middle of next week. That's a check on your weather.
Vancouver's news is always available on the radio with News 1130 or online anytime at citynews1130.com. Your next edition of City News is tonight at 11. Thank you so much for watching and have a great night.